We're recording this talk with Mayor Hillary Schieve of the City of Reno on June 8th, 2020. Mayor Schieve, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, first, how are you personally holding up in light of the events of the past few months?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm very much an optimist, so I never like to focus on the bad or the negative, those kinds of things. Obviously, it's been an incredibly trying time, not just for our community, but our entire country. The last, geez, I'd say 4 or 5 months now. So, yeah, I'm doing okay. You have to take it one day at a time, and a lot of listening is really important. I've learned to listen really well because people have really great ideas, and sometimes government does not do well with innovation or forward thinking or things like that. So I've learned a lot to listen, which is great, but it's been very, very stressful. I mean, when you literally have your entire world and your business shut down and people around you are becoming sick, and then obviously having to pivot into a situation that, I think was probably something of great change. But at the same time, obviously the events that have happened with Mr. Floyd and watching what took place across the country, I really believe this is our moment. This is our moment to get it right. I'm not so sure our generation will get another chance to lay the foundation for, our minority communities moving forward. And it's time to have very, very difficult conversations that we're not typically used to having. So it's really a time to also look at compassion and how we treat one another. I think we took a lot for granted. I can certainly say that. I mean, little things that, certainly during this time of a pandemic, that it's even the little things that I hope that people realize that we should have gratitude for. And that could be having a beer with a friend, or being able to go out to a great restaurant, or something to that magnitude, right? Just the little things. And I do think that we sort of lost our way for a long time with, certainly in the last 4 or 5 years. It seems that there's been a lot of disconnect between communities and people and compassion. And I think, that's what I hope that comes out of all of this, whether it's a situation that we've been in the last week, looking at so many different facets of our just rebuilding a community when it comes to our culture and when it comes to our minority communities and investing in them. And it's, community care and compassion. And I think we're really taking a different look when it comes to local government of what that looks like.
So, opinion poll after opinion poll shows the public trusts local government instead of federal government. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, I honestly think it's because within local government, we know each other. I've known you for many years, right? And I shop at the same grocery stores that you do. A lot of our local government and even our state government is very, very accessible. Certainly in Nevada, we are probably one of the most accessible, but we are just like, everyone else. Everyone's kids play together, and it's just a small community here. But I think that local government we can really impact your life. And I don't think people realize that. They typically tend to focus on federal government. They always, when it comes to presidential elections, and those are incredibly important. But if you really think about how your community is affected, it really comes from your local government. And I think we're much more transparent. Certainly, we have something at the local government structure, what we don't have at the state government structure, but one of the things we have is open meeting law. And so I think that also helps with government transparency. It can also hinder certain conversations that need to be had as well, because you can't have, more than three people or as considered a walking quorum. But to your point, I think local government affects so much change about what we do. I mean, just look at the situation. I had to go and, shut down local businesses. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. So at that moment, so so many people in our community realized, hey, our local government can really affect my outcome in life, right? But I think at the local level, we are incredibly transparent. We're very accessible, and especially I think when I was elected, the biggest change I wanted to see was opening the doors to City Hall and making sure our community was shaping our community. It's not so much your elected leaders, it's really listening to your community, bringing their ideas in and hearing them and saying, what kind of community do you want to see? And I think that's really critical.
All right, Mayor Schieve, so building on that, why should we know our local government?
I think because they have so much impact on your daily life, but also in your business, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's lasting impact, it's policy that we can make. Sometimes we do things that have unintended consequences. And if people are not at the table and our community is really not sitting down, we can do some things that can be pretty drastic and not realize the unintended consequences of them. For instance, for me, one of the reasons I ran for office is the city wanted to charge me $5,000 to move my sign 2 feet. And instead of complaining about it, I got activated and went to City Hall and sort of, fought some of the bureaucracy and the red tape that we just love to put into government. And we do. And that's very challenging. And so I think for me, people need to really realize the impact that we can have on your life. Like I said, whether it's your daily life or whether it's in your business. So that's why people really should be at the table. Certainly, like, especially with COVID, seeing different industries, right? I think watching that unfold, we're very different than Southern Nevada. I really believe that our population is different. Everything about North and South is very, very different. And so I think, I really, as someone that lives and was born and raised in my community, knew that we have we have a different sort of standard up here in the North than the South. And I felt like we need to pay attention to some of the numbers that are happening, obviously, with the coronavirus, but we need to pay attention to, how many numbers do we have up here in the North versus the South? And also in a lot of the rural areas, they did not have any cases at all. So maybe they roll out first and then some of the other counties follow. But, just sort of putting us into one pot, I think, it kind of, it sort of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, right? So again, I think when you have access to your local government, you can really affect change. I would just say, even with the tattoo artists, many of them already have some really stringent guidelines in place, right? And I think, even at our level or at the state level, not hearing their voices can affect their business, right? And so that's really where we have to do a better job of bringing everyone in our community in. But I really saw it whenever, these businesses were shut down. And as a local government, we didn't know enough about their business and how they regulate them and those types of things. So we have to educate ourselves, but we need them at the table because they know their business better than we do. And that's something we should be listening to and making sure that we help those businesses.
So, Mayor Schieve, many people have lost jobs, been forced into a new normal for work, had their lives totally upended. That has to take a toll on mental health. You're an open advocate for talking about mental health challenges. How do we cope with this right now?
Well, that's a great question because even people I know that are mentally really strong are finding themselves struggling with talking about how they feel. And certainly, we have so many different emotions going through a pandemic, and sort of there's been a loss on, you know, on every sort of facet of our lives in some way. And I will tell you this, people would say to me, this isn't fair, Mayor Schieve, this isn't fair that our business is shut down and they're not shut down. And it's true. It's very hard to sort of digest what's happening, right? And so a lot of emotions happen. And certainly you could just hear the fear and also the unknown. Especially, I think in government, we've been so used to dealing with fires and floods and things like that. This is a pandemic. We can't see it. We can't wrap our head around it. I can't send my fire department to go and fix it, right? So I think people are having a lot of emotions, and especially people that typically, don't think about also taking care of their inner self first. And I think a lot of people have had to learn how to do that, how to cope with that stress. A lot of people have lost their jobs. Look at our unemployment rate, incredibly high. Um, and now, more than ever with the death of George Floyd, I think that people are really trying to examine how they feel. And that's a really hard thing because mental health in our country, we don't talk about it enough. It's a stigma. I mean, look at how we deal with mental health and addiction. I mean, if you are arrested for using drugs, we put you in jail. We've got to stop thinking of that kind of mentality and think about, our community and how we invest in them and services. Services are really, really critical in getting them help, but we have to start talking about it. And it's really hard. I will tell you, even for me with mental health, I have a sibling that suffers from bipolar and depression. And it's something that I didn't talk about for a very long time. I was ashamed of it. And so I kind of have been there firsthand to know what it's like to not want to talk about it. And I think that's the first and foremost thing to let people know we've got to start having these tough conversations. But again, it comes back to getting people services and the way that we handle this challenge throughout our country. But it's also got to start at a very, very early age from our right down to our kindergartens, right? Talking about how we feel. And if you're not okay today, let's say it. Typically, if I say to you, how are you doing today? What's the response you're going to give me?
I'm okay.
Well, that's a little more honest than most people. Usually they say, fine, thank you.
Yeah.
We're programmed to just say, I feel fine, thank you, instead of saying, today's a tough one. Today's been a tough one. And really breaking it down with our emotions and how we feel. And it's okay to admit you're not okay. And I think that's something that we need to recognize, especially in this country. We are afraid to fail, and failure is not something we're even allowed to talk about. And I actually look at failure as something, it is a good thing. We need to start embracing those failures. That's how we get better.
Okay, so you've used the hashtag "the mayor made me do it" on your Twitter account in the last few months. What do you want for our residents and neighbors to do moving forward, since you're making them do it?
Yes.
What do you?
Yes, hashtag mayor made me do it. I think this is a really pivotal time, certainly with the events from COVID to now looking at our minority populations and watching, George Floyd and how people are feeling about that. And again, starting to talk about it, having these difficult conversations, but coming together as a community to change it. I think this is our moment. And I think this is the moment to get it right. And I think that if we don't take this moment, I really don't think that we will get it back. And this is the time to really be able to focus on our future and certainly for our Black children that are going to struggle for a long time if we don't take the responsibility for our entire community and really again, having those difficult conversations, because this is the moment to do it and to change it so it has long lasting impact throughout our community, and investing in those areas that we haven't been good at investing in, whether it's infrastructure or affordable housing, or even in our police departments, of making sure that they have the resources that they need when it comes to sort of de-escalation and dealing with mental health. I mean, that's a big one. Again, so much of that comes from that we haven't addressed it, and we've sort of had this culture that it's not okay to feel weak, right? And so I think there's a lot of different things that we can be doing as a community, but what I want everyone to do is come together, have the difficult conversations, and be a part of that process. But this is the time to do it. This is our now. This is our moment.
What's the most unexpected thing you've learned from the events of the past few months?
The most unexpected thing I would say is that life can change in a moment, right? It can certainly change overnight. And I think we have to show a lot of compassion for one another and be there for one another. I think that is really important, that we reach out to our community, but and make sure that we are shaping things in a way that our future will be better. So I think for me, it's again having difficult conversations, things that we haven't talked about in decades. So I think that's going to be critical. And I think it's important for especially elected leaders to be listening. First seek to understand, then seek to be understood, right?
Mayor Schieve, thank you so much for being here today with us. We
Thank you for
appreciate your
having
time.
me. Thank you for having me.